Hi, readers. I'm Jordan.
And I'm Katie.
And welcome to Not Another Heroine, the podcast where we break down the best and worst fictional heroines, those swashbuckling ladies who have to work a little harder than expected for their happy ending.
This week, it's time to review our heroine in a Q&A session better titled, This is Why Katie Hates Bran. So before we jump into things, we should probably announce our next book.
Absolutely. We are reading The Stardust Thief.
By Chelsea Abdullah. Brand new, released this year? Recently?
No, it was released in June of last year.
Oh, okay.
Her book 1 of a trilogy, and books 2 and 3 are not out yet.
Correct. One is releasing this year, though, at the end of this year. And
November, I believe.
Oh, okay, yeah. And then one in 2024. If you're listening to this in the future, it is January 2023. I'm getting real, what is the word? Not insinuating, but full of myself, cocky, that I think that people are going to be listening to this podcast
in 2024. Well, we hope.
I have high hopes, high dreams. Also, we need to address.
There's a very important issue that we have not addressed since episode 1.
The flashlight issue.
The flashlight. So if you do recall the fire sticks that we tried to describe as both flashlights and glow sticks.
In my defense, I knew the glow sticks was not right.
I also knew glow sticks weren't right. However, we have been informed by a very kind listener that police, in fact, don't use glow sticks. They use.
I'm sorry.
They use. I just imagine some police officers waving around glow sticks at a rave.
Yeah.
They're called flares. In case if you're waiting like in breathless anticipation of this moment, they are called flares.
I just imagine people are sitting in their car, just like absolutely dumbstruck. Like, it's flares. It's flares.
It took you 5 episodes to answer this one part.
And I was talking to Jordan about this the other day, but I swear to God, I was in my bed thinking about what this fucking word was, and it was a complete black space in my mind.
We promised ourselves not to Google it, and
yeah, I could have been held at gunpoint and immediately died.
Flares.
Flares.
Okay.
Yes.
Case closed. All right, let's jump right into some book club questions, because that's the point of this episode.
That it is. Not flares, but
no, we should revisit our episode structure.
Oh yes. So the first 2-ish typically episodes will be a kind of hit by hit, play by play of the book. In this case, because the book that we read was originally published as 2 books, it got kind of wonky. So there was 4 episodes, 2 for each book, if you can do math.
I can't do math.
So my hands got
but
sweaty.
Our heroine, Mel, can do math. So
that she can. That's always like a little thing thrown in there. Yeah, she can do math. I can't. Cool, that's clarified. And then the 5th episode, or more typically the 3rd episode, is a Q&A session.
That would be this one that you're tuning into.
The one that you are listening to currently is the Q&A session, where we hypothetically will answer questions.
We'll get detoured and gossip and probably hate on some reviews that we disagree with.
Yes. You can call this the tangent episode.
Yes.
Where it's like, I'm a listen to this, very low stakes, cleaning the house, need something to kind of listen to get you through it. This is the one. No brain power required.
Exactly. It should be fun, though. Question 1.
Yes.
Had you heard about this book before starting it? Do you think it was Ober? Do you think Ober? Do you think it was overhyped or should be celebrated more?
So I'm trying to think back, because if you've listened to the other episodes before this one, obviously, I have read this book before. We read it for the podcast. I was probably like 20, so a handful of years ago. Can't do math.
Definitely just heard a handful of beers ago.
We are drinking cider, but a handful of years ago. And I want to say it was not one that was on my to be read TBR shelf in Goodreads. And I just kind of stumbled across it randomly and saw that it kind of had some good reviews. And I was like, maybe I'll get around to this. But then I saw on Amazon that it was only like $3.99 or something.
That is shameful.
What part's shameful?
The price. I'd pay 20. I would pay like old school hardcover price for this book.
Oh, I agree. But I don't know if I would initially, like not having read it, The Power of Hindsight or whatever that in 2020 hindsight, whatever that phrase is. But anyways, yeah, I was like, oh, it's cheap, like very low risk. I'll just go ahead and read it. And I was immediately bewildered why it was not hyped up more. Because again, like I've mentioned it a couple times, it hits all of the categories. You got the enemies to lovers. Like I made a whole reel about this actually. So check out our Instagram. Hint, hint,
it's
nudge,
very
nudge.
well
done. It's got the core intrigue. It's got the anonymous letters. Like it hits all of the motherfucking syllabus.
Okay, so if you read this book for no other reason, read it for the letters.
Yeah, that's true.
There's not many of them, but the few that are just fantastic.
Mm-hmm. This is a support group for people that fell in love with these letters and then got sad when the book was over. Yeah. So do you think it's overhyped? I feel like we hype it up a ton on this podcast, but is it worth it?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think it's overhyped because no one knows about it.
Mm-hmm. It continually surprises me.
So I read this book when I was 12 or 13, I think. And I read it because my close friend, who I was in band with in the flute section together with, little side note here, we did not start out as friends. I hated her guts because I was a moody 12-13-year-old,
as we all were,
but she was determined to be my friend.
I love those people. Like, I'm gonna make you like me.
Exactly. And so we bonded over books, and I think this is one of the books she recommended to me. And now funnily enough, to quote Miss Katie here, funnily, my friend, her name is Jo. She's a writer in her own right.
Oh,
see what I did there?
That was cute. Writer in her own right. I'm gonna be honest. The other day, I spelled right, and I spelled it RIGHT, and then I was like, that doesn't look right, and I had an existential crisis.
That's okay.
Thank you.
We've all been there. We've multiple times.
Yeah. Anyway,
so not overhyped at all, and should be hyped up more.
I agree.
Actually, that leads us into.
I was about to say that's a good segue.
Yeah,
into
the review.
The review.
Oh my goodness. Okay, I'll explain how the Goodreads review works a little bit if you want to kind of after that dive into the review itself.
Yes.
So there's multiple entries on Goodreads for Crown Duel. So there's one for the joint edition that has both books, Crown and Court Duel. There is a separate entry for Crown Duel, and then there's one for Court Duel. The joint edition has, I believe, about 24,000 reviews, and most of them are positive.
Also, though, 24,000 is not a lot.
Not a lot. Not compared to
A Court of Thorns and Roses.
Yeah, Sarah J. Maas,
like 2 million or something.
So many reviews. And then Crown Duel as a standalone entry on Goodreads has only 8,000 reviews, and the top community review is a 1-star rating. I won't list the reviewer's name.
It is only a first name. Well, actually, if you click on it, you'll immediately see what the review is.
If you're curious, go to the 8,000 reviewed version of Crown Duel on Goodreads and read this review for yourself. But we have we strongly disagree with this review, and we'll kind of break it down for you.
Strongly is such a nice word because it makes me angry and tired.
Where do you want to even start? Because this reviewer left.
I almost want to read it word for word, which is maybe a little too mean, but there's so many parts individually that made me angry.
Okay, I'll read one section here. The hero and heroine of the book are not fit to hold the name.
Okay, so first of all, the audacity, because that is a very fucking aggressive statement to make right off the bat. This is in her second sentence of the review. Because first of all, what criteria are you using? And second of all, anyone can be a hero or a heroine depending on the circumstances in which they are placed, or, in which life happens. Like, people in real life can be heroes and heroines
You
with
don't have
very
to have
limited
special
criteria.
Yeah, you don't need special magical powers to be a heroine or a hero.
Well, actually, according to this person, you do. As she thinks that Mel is not overly strong or smart, and she possesses no magical abilities. As far as I can tell, her general likability is her greatest strength, but even that seems forced.
Excuse me? Okay, so I would argue with general likability because she is not likable.
No, people don't like her. Like, they only like her because she has the not representation. Holy shit. Katie, your brain.
You're struggling today, Katie.
I am so much.
Have some more cider, it'll help.
I don't think it will, because the word is still not coming to me. Your street cred. The real person word for that. I wanted to say it again. It's not representation.
Anyway, I don't know where you're going with this. Usually I do, and I can help you out a little bit, but I am blanking.
It starts with an R. This is flares all over again. I have PTSD from this interaction. But she has the street cred. Okay, we'll just use this.
Street cred is fine.
The word, whatever word for it. But she has the street cred amongst these people as being this crazy person that single-handedly attempted to take down the king of their nation as some like hodunk, bumpkin country courtier. So it's like, no, she's not likable for her personality. She's likable because she has this like bigger than life just aura about her in like stories and mythos. She has almost
ambition.
Yeah. But she has this kind of like a big thing about her. So it's like, no, she's not a likable person at all, but that's part of what makes her fun as a main character.
She's very human.
Yeah. Because also, I don't want my heroines to always have magical abilities or be like overly smart or strong, because I also, as a person, do not have magical abilities, and I am not overly strong or smart, as we have we have just experienced through the whole R word representation.
we all struggle. We all have our good traits, our bad traits, our weaknesses and strengths, and the balance that Mel has as a heroine is fantastic.
She's a real person.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that made me angry. And then do you want to talk about the rebellion?
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
This statement really ticked me off reading this review. Okay, I'll just read it word for word. Quoting the reviewer here. The rebellion is unrealistic in the extreme. No matter their birthright or station, an entire country following two teenagers into a hopeless war would not happen. Well, obviously, no, of course it wouldn't happen. And it doesn't happen in this book. The whole point of this book is the fact that Mel and Bran, fucking Bran, try and do this war, and it doesn't work, specifically because they are young, they're inexperienced, they don't know what they're doing.
They're also a scapegoat. Like, that's very plainly stated by the Marquis of Chevreuil and his parents. Like, yeah, sorry guys. Like,
we needed someone to blame.
Yeah, like we just needed some catalyst to kick off King Galdrin and then kind of stage our own very non-violent coup, basically.
Which is much more realistic.
Yeah, but also, I will say that rebellions have started with like two teenagers, like.
Should we look at
whole Arab Spring?
Yeah.
The whole like Islamic Republic, the whole protests that are happening in Iran right now. Like, that is not a great statement to make, lady. In 2011, when was the Arab Spring? Because that was all college students. Might have been a couple of years after this. Probably like what, 2013, 2014?
2013 sounds right to me, but
yeah. Well. But I mean, again, this is fantasy still.
Like, did you even pay attention? Like, I'll admit, like, I'll read a book and not be fully engaged. I'll skim it. I'll just want to get through it. And maybe that's what this person did, but don't do that and then write this kind of review.
Yeah, because we talked about it earlier, but she gives the book 1 star, which I interestingly had a conversation with my partner where he's like, I don't give out 5-star reviews because that's like, it has to be the book. I'm like, okay, that's fair, but I give like 5-star reviews out like candy. But 1-star reviews should be, I feel like, universally, held for books that either are unreadable because of grammar issues or
not
spelling.
edited.
Yeah, or there's, some kind of like moral issue wrong with the book. Like they wrote some like fucked up stuff and you're like, no, this is not my cup of tea. I'm gonna like DNF it. But to leave a 1-star review for a book that literally in her review she says it did have some good points, like you're at least at 2 stars now. Like I don't know.
I agree. I don't rate books, like I don't leave a review or a rating for books that I do not finish ever. It's just my review. And 5 stars I kind of reserve, but they're not like, if I start a book and then I just immediately want to finish it, I'll read it through the night. It keeps me up until 2:00 in the morning. That's usually a 4 or 5-star book for me.
That's fair. That's most books for me, though. I have a very, like, once you get me hooked, it's like it's got to get over right now.
That's fair. But yeah, 1 star seems. But like we just talked about, you have a different rating style. I do. Your partner does.
Yeah.
To each their own. But still, 1 star seems
excessive,
very,
and mean.
Yeah, like speaking of mean, her last statement in this review is, "I would not recommend it to anyone."
But lady, you literally said that it did have some good points. So how are you gonna say that?
And then why would you not recommend it? Like, what's your foundation here? Like, the rebellion is unrealistic. Even if that were true, that's really it's a YA fantasy novel. It's not.
This wasn't complicated enough for me.
Yeah,
I was offended by the unrealisticness. Like, honey,
you have tree people and flares, okay?
Flares.
Yeah. So to sum it all up, we don't agree with this review. We think it's undeserved, and I'm glad it's only on the 8,000 reviewed version, not the joint version, but still,
yeah,
it does not do justice to this book.
I will admit that when I'm thinking about reading a book, I'll look through the Goodreads reviews. That's weirdly a mouthful. And if I see quite a few that kind of say the same thing in its negative comments, I won't read it. And so it worries me that when you have these reviews that have so many likes, and I think even some of the comments on this was that people were like, oh, like, thank you for leaving this review. I'm not going to read this book. But it's like, how many people has she dissuaded? That's a word, right?
Maybe.
I'm like 80%
yeah,
on
that.
I think
yeah.
But how many people has she dissuaded from reading this book for kind of silly reasons? Like,
and Katie and I talked about this earlier, which is, it's okay to not like a book because you don't just like what it's about, or you don't like the style of it. Like, it's more plot driven versus character driven. You don't have to like it, but that doesn't make it a bad book.
Yes, there is a difference between bad books and undeveloped books, or books that maybe aren't quite done, or need a little more baking time, a little more thought. But there's a significant difference between those two. And I think that's kind of lost sometimes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yikes. It just makes me sad. And she also uses the word willful to describe Mel. And I even went into the Googs and
you did not just say the Googs.
That is what it is called.
Oh dear. I need alcohol after that.
I went to the Googs, and willfulness is defined as stubbornly determined to have one's own way. So I think to a degree that is true. But if you are going to pull out a word like willfulness to describe a character, like, it needs to be pretty spot on, because that's not a word, like an adjective, I immediately would use to describe anyone.
And that's the quality this reviewer hyper focus on. Like, she says Mel has no other qualities other than her willfulness and her general likability.
But it's like, willfulness isn't even the right word.
No.
That's what made me mad. Because, like, sure, Mel is like kind of stubbornly determined, but it's if she really was, her brother would be on the throne. You know what I mean? And she immediately just kind of gets rid of that idea after some reasonable points from the Marquis. She's like, okay, yeah, maybe Bran isn't smart or enough to be on the throne. Like, fair point. Cool. Okay. But if she was stubbornly determined, like,
If the defining aspect of Mel's personality was her willfulness, she never would have been, oh, I'm ignorant of the world. I need to educate myself.
Yes.
I need to learn more.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah.
Irritated.
So, dear reviewer, you're wrong.
That was so polite.
We respectfully ask that you reread this book since it has been 12 years since you reviewed it. And I'd be curious to see what this person thinks upon rereading it. Because, maybe when we initially read this book, we probably had different observations than we do now.
I don't think so. I think I immediately liked it. I'm gonna be real. But also, what if she rereads it and she hates it more?
Oh, maybe don't reread this.
Uno reverse.
A little quick note on Crown Duel and its history. I was digging on Sherwood Smith's website.
Nerd. Sorry.
Does that
It felt deserved.
Come on now. I think if I remember correctly, she wrote this when she was 20. So she was, can you imagine writing this book at 20 years old?
Oh,
what an accomplishment in and of itself.
That makes me sad about myself. Right? All I have is this podcast.
and Sherwood Smith's got some really cool backstory. So you should visit her website and read a little bit more about her. She's got another cool catalog of books as well that are nothing like Crown Duel, actually.
That beautifully segues into a question, since we have tangent for probably 20 minutes, maybe. Not good at math. What other books by this author have you read, Jordan, and how did they compare to this book?
Thank you so much for asking me this question. I am delighted to answer. I have read a few books by this author. I haven't read her entire catalog. I've kind of dabbled here and there. The one that sticks with me that I actually have reread a couple times, it's called The Trouble with Kings.
It came up recommended on my Amazon the other day.
No, don't read it. Oh, don't read it yet, so we can read it later and review it together on our podcast.
You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah. So The Trouble with Kings is delightful, and it is very much in the same style as Crown Duel. It's kind of I think the author, places it in the same genre, like that fantasy, little bit of romance.
Can you give us a synopsis?
Let me see if I remember.
It can be like my mildly embarrassing one of the Bridge Kingdom. As the threshold here for synopsises.
If I remember correctly, it's about I think it's centered to a party, like a royal party, and a bunch of royals are invited to attend.
Oh, okay.
So it centers on a couple different princesses, and the main character is a princess, but she's more of a quiet, withdrawn, intellectual princess type who kind of sits back and observes the goings on around her. God, I don't like the way that sounded, but we'll roll with it. And I don't remember the heroine's name, but I remember really liking her as a character. She's not like Mel, but she's still very relatable.
So if Mel is the outgoing, extroverted character, this one is like the more introverted, like
think before she leaps kind of character. Yes. And there's a very dark and broody, but not in a
my favorite. There's dark and broody.
There's a dark and broody king. He's not really broody. He's kind of chivalrous in behavior. Just a little hard to read, but still fun.
Almost control freaky.
I think so.
An amusing, fun way.
Yeah. So it's very much the plot revolves around some sort of princess party thing. It's light reading.
Is it like Glass Onion in Knives Out, or it's like a Clue almost?
No, I don't believe so. But again, it's been a little while since I read it, but I did enjoy it so much. I originally read it on my Kindle, and then I went and hunted down a hard copy of it.
Dang.
So I could have it here.
2 copies.
It's kind of got a cringy cover.
They all do.
Yeah.
Rail.
But yeah, it's definitely worth reading. So The Trouble with Kings. If you liked Crown Duel, read that one next.
Oh, thank you, Jordan.
Oh, you're welcome.
Probably more accurate than some of the recommendation AI on Goodreads.
Or the Kindle app.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's read this free book.
Mhm.
No, thank you.
That's
It was
very
not
good.
edited.
Oh my girl, that is the worst.
I'm going to ask you a question.
Oh no.
Are you ready for this?
No. Okay.
I don't know if you can answer this, but which characters did you like least?
Oh, Bran. Done. Buzzer in. No questions asked.
I mean, Bran is, he's a goofball older brother type.
So I think that Bran would be not that bad if you're not related to him. And like, because this is in first person with Mel is like it is us self-insert, I get super irritated with him. It's just like, it's cool to be honest and be like that goofy, like, I don't care about like social etiquette cues or anything. But he inadvertently roasts the fuck out of Mel all the time. All the time.
I get that, but do you have older brothers?
No, I'm the oldest.
So I will say, having had an older brother, I mean, I still have an older brother. My older brother's alive. Let's clarify that.
That was a little sad.
I didn't mean to go in that direction. But Bran is not that bad. He's just kind of stupid. That's kind of where I would argue. Like, he's a little oblivious. He's a little, especially in the part 2 in Court Duel of the book, Bran is very self-centered.
Yeah.
He's like all about his new, I got a hot girlfriend. I got a rich lifestyle. So I'm just going to be me.
You're not into astrology, are you?
I mean, I'm a Gemini.
Oh, okay. So what do you think Bran's astrological sign is?
Oh,
because I think Mel is like a Cancer or a Taurus where they got like a lot of emotional stuff going on like under the surface and they like take everything fucking personally as
your
like a direct...
Gen Z is showing so hard.
It's a reasonable like way to categorize people or categorize people.
Category.
Oh my God.
We're going to keep that for the rest of the podcast.
Nice.
Category people.
Category people.
Okay.
How do you
a Cancer or a Taurus? So she's a crab or she's a bull? I would lean towards. Please tell me you know what a Taurus is.
I do. Yeah, a bull. I would, but maybe she's a bull. Like very direct, like
very direct, a little too blunt sometimes. Charges forward without thinking.
Yeah, and then regrets it sometimes later.
Exactly.
Yeah, but takes everything very personally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll admit. I know a lot about my own astrological sign because, self-awareness. We're trying here. But I only know about like mine and Scorpios.
Oh, everybody knows about Scorpios.
Yeah, who doesn't, right? Because a Scorpio will tell you all about Scorpios. Yep. We all have that one friend. Yep. So I don't know what Bran would be, but he would be that.
I think he's like not a Sagittarius, but that same kind of like maybe an Aries. Like that fiery energy, like wants to be involved in things. But I think Aries aren't as self-aware as Bran. Like he knows that he's like making social blunders.
But he just doesn't care.
Yeah. So maybe not an Aries.
Here's another question that's not on our book club list.
Yeah.
What does Nee, we're going to call her Nee because pronunciation.
Nee.
The Knights of Nee.
French people are probably like, are you fucking kidding me?
Please tell me you know what the Knights of Nee references.
I don't. Oh my God. What's the Knights of Nee?
We're going to come back to that much later.
Okay.
Anyway, what does Nee see in Bran?
So I think her whole story arc, which is interesting because she doesn't get a lot of like character development like through the book. But I feel like hers is she's been stuck in this like very socially confining like environment her whole life. And then all of a sudden this like dude, bustles in all accidental, falling all over the place and like laughing at himself. And he's like, oh my God, this is like what real people are like. And then immediately like in love, maybe not insta love, but like really close like on that line.
That's fair because they kind of characterize Nee like from like Mel's perspective throughout the book as this kind of a country bumpkin courtier aristocrat. Like she's kind of sidelined a little bit by the fancy people.
Because doesn't she say like Lady Tamara has never like said she's a cousin in public ever until she's with Mel.
Man, Lady Tamara, that's a whole other.
Yeah.
So let's get into Lady Tamara later. But yeah, I just can't. Bran's a redhead. I don't got anything against redheads.
He's a redhead?
Katie.
I know.
Katie, in the very beginning.
I just skip past like their descriptions and I'm just like, what do I think this
I can quote this part of the book. The only thing Bran and I share is our auburn hair and blue eyes. Like, look at the cover of the book.
Oh, so that explains like a lot.
Okay. Oh, so now we know how Katie judges people.
Maybe. Redheads are in their own category. That's like a category person.
They're like Scorpios.
I could see that. Yeah. I mean, the easiest to identify like right off the bat.
My one redheaded friend is a Scorpio.
That is a lot altogether. Like that is a huge, that is your whole personality. You are a redheaded Scorpio and that's it. You could have all kinds of like hidden depths, but nope.
That's okay. That is okay. They have their strengths too.
They do.
Okay. Next question. We need to stay on track.
Yeah, that's fair. If you were making a movie of this book, who would you cast as who?
You question stealer.
I know. I'm sorry. That one's the fun one.
We prepped this question. Okay. So, we already talked about our hero, our swoon-worthy hero, and who we would cast. So I'll skip over him.
But we didn't record it though.
I'm trying to save a little bit, but all right, fine. Legolas. So any of you who have seen Lord of the Rings, right? We know Aragorn, we know Gimli. I'm showing my nerdness right now. But Legolas is the, tall, leggy.
Did you hear the like breathiness when you said leggy?
Leggy. He knows how to use a bow and arrow.
Oh my god. We all had that like coming to Jesus moment at like 13 to 16 where we see Legolas for the first time and the like air is blowing his hair back and you're like, oh my god.
Hello, you can do whatever you'd like. It's fine. Just continue being your elfy self.
I know I'm like a preteen, but like it could happen.
So the Danric, the Marquis of Chevraeth, our hero, our lead, this dude has got a lot of patience for what he has to deal with.
Oh my god,
right?
That poor man.
I don't know that I would necessarily cast Orlando Bloom, but like anyone who can kind of give that Legolas vibe. We were talking earlier. Henry Cavill as the Witcher with his platinum blonde hair, but his burly physique.
Oh my god, yes.
Oh man, but he would not make a good Vidandric. He wouldn't.
I feel like he could maybe like voice Vidandric like really well, but
I got shivered on that one.
I know. I got all like, oh my god. But he's not like thin and willowy.
Thinny, we're making words now, is what we are.
We are. But like willowy, and I feel like Vidandric is one of those people that everything is organized. He like wakes up at like 6:47 a.m. and then 1 minute later he's like, okay, now I need to brush my teeth. And then 2 minutes after that he's like, okay, now I need to make my bed. And then like Mel is like, I'm crashing through life. I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning.
That's fair. But it's interesting. They describe Vidandric in the very beginning that like he's always smiling. Like he has lines that says he smiles all the time and he's laughing at life. And he's just kind of not a go with the flow type, but like oh, you're cute.
Which is weird because like from Mel's perspective, which is what we get through the whole book, you never get that side of him. You always get the very like reserved, like in control of his emotions, like is suave only because he's in the court and he has to be. Yeah.
But so that's an interesting note actually about this first person narrative and Crown Duel, right? Because you read some other heroine driven novels that are written in first person, but the author kind of cheats a little bit and gives you the perspective of the hero sometimes in a roundabout way. This actually preserves that, we don't actually know what the hero is thinking. We're not going to jump to his perspective. We only get Mel's view of him.
Yeah. And I feel like that kind of like answers some of her like self questions about what the relationship is and her like misinterpretations of situations where like it kind of makes you as the reader side with her more. Whereas if we got that dual POV, you would immediately be like, oh, she's a fucking idiot. Well, And while you kind of like think that while you're reading, you also like empathize with her. You're like, okay, I understand her reactions. Like, yeah, maybe she's being kind of stupid about it, but like I too would probably have some of these same reactions. Like
exactly. So that's what makes Mel unique as a heroine, right? Like, oh, you know she's making stupid choices, right? You like, and you don't agree with what she's doing, but if you were to put yourself in those same circumstances, you'd probably do the same thing if you're, I don't know how old she is, 17, 18 years old, maybe.
I don't know how old she is.
Well, that's another note for later on in our discussion, but
yeah, because she's got to be like, I think she's 18 because she has her like flower day.
But they don't specify what a flower day is. It 16? Is it 17 and 18? I think Bran's supposed to be around 21.
I could see that.
And that's another 21-year-olds really knowing and leading military armies, all of that jazz.
That is true. You just ignore age and you assume
you have to in this genre, right? It doesn't make any sense. Otherwise, how do you don't have? But that's another cool thing about Mel is her failures and her mistakes are very realistic for her age and her experience.
Wow, I didn't even put it in that like frame of mind. I just went like straight from her personality. It's like, okay, it makes sense. She's like making these decisions and feeling these way about things. But when you add in the age factor, it's like, oh yeah, like all 16 to 19-year-olds feel this way about situations and are very like self-conscious about everything and like take things too personally. Like that checks out. That makes sense.
Right? Like, I mean, but that was the other cool thing too, though. We started with this book because it's so good. Like we rag on some things, but
it is so underrated. That's the part, like, so I get that, like, right now, book talk and everything is super focused on, like, super spicy books that are maybe not, like, written well, but this is, like, not spicy at all. Like, it's, like...
Oh, it's very clean. Like,
yeah.
I would happily I think I have given this book to my mother and told her to read it. She did not, by the way.
Oh, my God. But it's, like, bland chicken with, like, a little bit of salt if you're just rating spice. But, like... it's wholesome. It's like cute, and you kind of like are sitting at like, wherever you're in your cozy chair reading this book, and you're like squealing out loud because you're like, oh my God, this is so fucking cute.
Well, the nice thing though is, yes, we, on this podcast, we like to focus on, fantasy romance, right? And that can be a lot of fantasy and a little bit of romance, a lot of romance and a little bit of fantasy. And this one kind of errs on the side of like, a lot of fantasy, a lot of world building, like delicate world building, I would say, and just a touch, just enough to keep you engaged and invested in the characters of the romance aspect, but you don't feel like you're missing anything.
Yeah, and I think that's something that she does really well is the slow burn romance, which is like something that everybody loves right now, that they're obsessed with, that people don't always do well because they just like are, want to push this romantic narrative on the characters, even if it's like not set up or they're like not in the right mind frame. But she like develops it out like really well. Like the first part, you were distinctly like, they are fucking enemies. Like I'm all team Mel, like fuck this Marquis guy. Like what the fuck is he doing? But then by the end, you're like, oh my God, like get together, like just fucking kiss already.
So I read a really interesting article. It was either an article or review, and I wish I could remember, like, so I could give the proper sourcing on this one, right? But they compared this story, this writing style, to Jane Austen, and they said there's a lot of Pride and Prejudice elements in the story between Mel and Vidanric, Chevreith, the Marquis of Chevreith, whatever you want to call this hero. It's this Mel's prejudice against the courtiers and the aristocracy, right?
Yeah.
And then poor Vidanric's just trying to be a good guy, and he doesn't know how to communicate very well. So, and he's too proud to kind of like admit, like, oh, actually, maybe I just need to be a real person for a little while.
Yeah. So if this was Pride and Prejudice, and I'm talking about the movie, the like,
the hand scene.
Yeah, the hand scene. So the hand scene, for people that might not be familiar, is when...
How do you not know the hand scene?
That's fair, but like, maybe some people don't know.
I would hope our listeners know the hand scene in Pride and Prejudice. We're talking about Pride and Prejudice with Keira Knightley, and we don't know the dude's name, but we all know the hand scene.
Oh my God, yeah. She's getting into the carriage, and she puts her hands out, and all of a sudden, this like dickhead character is like, oh, let me help you. And then he has the like hand clutch moment too, as he's like walking away, like, why the fuck did I do that? And she, like, Keira Knightley is just like baffled. Like he's not an asshole, and there's like all kinds of like emotions and like hormones running through your body while you're watching this, and you're like, this is the single most romantic thing I've ever seen, and they just touched hands. what is the equivalent of that scene in this book?
Oh my gosh, I just got warm fuzzies thinking about that. You like
hands.
You already know what my answer is going to be, right? That scene, it's towards the end, so you really have to work to get to this scene. You have to earn it. The author makes you really suffer to earn your fairy tale ending on this one. And I'm assuming our very dear listeners have already read the book, I hope, because
at this point,
because the build up to the scene is so worth it. It's so worth not knowing what happens at the scene when you get to it. But Danrik, when he's just pulling and tugging at those gloves, like one finger at a time, and that could be taken in an entirely different context.
Oh my God, yeah. Like I said, there's no spice in this book.
No spice in this book. But yeah, so Danrik is very cleanly taking off his gloves slowly. And, we know he's wearing the ring. We know
I did not. So like I guessed. I'm not totally stupid, but like I didn't quite know. And then I was like, I hope this is what it's gonna go. But he took the gloves off, and then I'm like, oh, the ring, that makes sense. Like,
my gosh,
I hoped it was him. Because what if it wasn't? That would be
who else would it be? Who would you want it to be?
I don't know, some like other person.
Are you thinking the Duke?
No, he is just flirting with Mel because he thinks the whole thing is really fucking funny, because he knows his best friend, the Marquis of Chevrolet, is in love with Mel. And he knows
you
that Mel
love me, you want to kiss me.
It's like all the little like sparkly emojis that you can put around love. Like, he knows it. He is aware. And he also knows that Mel is completely, almost more in denial than the Marquis about how
No, there's no almost about this. She's in full denial. Like, we don't even get her character acknowledging the fact that she is even remotely attracted to Danrik until the very end.
Yeah, there's like little tidbits, but it's like right before that, like, the glove scene that we will,
But circling back around, that's the really cool thing about her character, because a lot of these like modern fantasy romance novels that we've been reading, there's a lot of like attraction right in the beginning, right? The heroine is like, oh, you're so hot.
Oh my God, that's like my pet peeve, because A Court of Thorns and Roses, like everyone always talks about ACOTAR or whatever, but like all of the characters in that are described as like devastatingly handsome or like the most beautiful man they had ever seen. It's like, give me a character that like she right off the bat is like, I fucking hate this dude. He's trying to like win this battle and like kill me in this revolution. Like, I fucking hate him. And then it's like, oh, but maybe he's like kind of hot, but like only right before they're like, oh, I love you. And it makes sense.
No, we don't get that. So yeah, we don't get that at all with Mel. That is one of the most likable things about Mel is she's not driven by that. She's not focused on that. She wants to save her people, save the tree people, right? Like, protect her family. She doesn't even think about her own, self and what she wants as an individual.
That's true.
Right?
I didn't think about
it's
that.
very admirable. Like, I'm not that admirable. No. Like, oh, you're very hot.
Yep.
Please come sit here.
Oh my God. I wrote that in my notes, and like, we're recording this before we talk about the whole synopsis is like a warm up kind of thing.
Yeah, we needed the warm up.
But in my notes, I literally write somewhere after one of the scenes between Mel and the Marquis that like I would fold instantly. That was my note. Like, because yeah, if I was in Mel's place, I would see this man with his like sparkly blonde hair and be like, okay, well, this is over. I don't care about,
Katie,
fuck the hill folk.
the poor ends. Like, but Katie, we've already established you have a thing for Legolas.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, you're already doomed from the beginning. Okay,
hands down, done.
Well, then we picked the right book for you.
We did.
this is the perfect hero to start with. Okay, we have gone sidebar after sidebar.
That is true. That is true.
One more question, maybe.
Yeah, I agree. Which one?
I'm looking. Okay, sometimes books start off strong but have endings that fall a little flat. Then there are books that are a little hard to get into at first but are enjoyable after a while. How did you find this one?
I would say I immediately got into it after the first couple chapters. There's something kind of surprising about the appeal almost, where you're like, at first when you're reading it and you're hearing about Mel and you're like, I don't know, this is kind of like YA. And then all of a sudden there's some kind of like weird intrigue and you're like, okay, my interest is piqued. But I will say that as much as I loved this book, the ending, it didn't feel rushed, but if you were talking about it from an outside perspective, it would sound rushed, if that makes sense. Because I felt like all of the loose ends were tied up neatly. But if you think about it, they go and face Flauvik in the Capitol, and then he is not murdered, but like transformed into a tree.
A beautiful tree.
In probably like 4 or 5 pages. It could not have been more than, you know what I mean?
Crown Duel ends the same way. So that's the ending of Court Duel. Is Flauvik turning into a colorwood tree. And then Crown Duel, the death of the king and the wrap up and Mel riding off into the sunset, that's also wrapped up pretty quickly.
Yeah. I didn't even think about that because I kind of approached it that they were all one book. But that's true because you don't even... I think we might have talked about it in another episode, but you don't even get King Galdrin's death on page. Like it kind of happens behind the scenes and they talk about it. So everything felt wrapped up, but it was very fast.
This book could have, both books, if they were separated, could easily have been 50 to 100 pages longer.
We did talk about that. Yeah, because I agree. Because from an internal perspective, it's like, okay, like I feel like that story was wrapped up. Like I understand the ending, but it's like you could have, like dragged it out a little bit, like
a little more chivalry and Mel.
Yeah, actually, a little more romance.
Okay, so one of the listeners pointed out that there are additional.
Oh yeah. Someone posted on our Instagram that the whole back of the definitive version has extra stories from Chevreut's perspective, and then I was looking at them, and I think there's one from the Duke of Savona's perspective too. I read that one, and it was good.
Then there's an extra one from Mel's perspective. I think it's called Vidanric's birthday surprise.
Oh yeah, when she. I did read that. Should we talk about it really quick? It was kind of cute.
By all means.
Do you want to?
I haven't read it recently.
Girl,
don't judge me.
I immediately finished the story and I'm like, oh, there's more. But so in this one, he's gone for some kind of thing that's happening on the border. There's some kind of civil unrest-esque kind of thing, I think, and I could be totally butchering this. But in the meantime, Mel has been practicing magic, and it's for his birthday so that she can have this kind of amazing, beautiful display of magical ability, and it's going to be beautiful, and she's super excited but also stressed out because it's Mel, and she's like, oh my god, what if he doesn't like it? And she's also been very kind of moody about the whole thing.
I wonder why she could be moody.
Weird. Interesting, because towards the end, he watches it and he's kind of not overly excited about it, and so Mel has a meltdown. When did that ever happen during the book?
Never. Not once.
But she's like, oh my god, he didn't like it, and she immediately starts crying, and so she walks back to their rooms all pissed off and upset, and she's like, oh my god. And I think in the scene she's even stacking her books away, I'm just gonna burn these, I don't need magic books anymore.
I'm worthless as a witch.
I will admit I have had a moment or two like that where you're like, I'm not worth this, I'm just gonna burn it all. And it's like, okay, let's take a deep breath.
In 6 months now we're gonna burn our microphones and all hail the podcast.
Yep, that's fair. But anyways, it ends up that his actual surprise is that she's pregnant, and he's like, no, I love the magic thing, but I was kind of expecting you to tell me something else, because I know something, and I'm pretty sure you know that you're pregnant, but you never told me. And she's like, I wanted it to be another surprise. And he's like, okay, stop crying, please. And then they have some cute reunion or whatever. But it was an adorable additional, to know that Mel is still Mel at heart, despite now being a queen and stuff. It's like, oh yeah, there she is.
Yep. She continues on.
That she does.
And fun fact, Mel and Vidanric also appear as secondary characters in other books in the same universe. I think the series is called the Norsunder Wars. I've dabbled a little bit in those books, but they also appear there.
That's fun.
Mhm.
I get stressed out when authors do that because I've been on the opposite end where you're reading a book and then they bring in these characters and it kind of feels like you're supposed to know them and you're like, I don't know who these people are.
I have no emotional investment in these characters whatsoever.
It's like, okay, cool. Like, it seems like I should know them and that I should like them.
But then it's kind of like Christmas when you realize, oh, there's 3 books dedicated specifically to those characters.
That is true. Yeah. Because it's also stressful, though, when the character that you're reading the book and the main character doesn't get along with the other characters. It's kind of like creates like gang wars where you're like, I'm not going to read those books. Like, she doesn't like them. I don't like them. Like, this is how it is. There was like an indie author that was kind of the vibe. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to read those. But then I did and they were good. So lesson there.
Benefit of the doubt.
Lesson there.
Give
for
the other
dear
characters
readers.
a chance.
Yes.
Especially if they're described as willful.
I'm going to fight this person. I think that is where we will end our episode. So from our shelf to yours,
we'll see you on the next page.
Hi, readers. If you'd like to help us pick our next book, send us a message on Instagram.
Or if you'd like to just listen, we post new episodes every Monday on Spotify, Amazon, or Apple Music. Thanks for listening.